sports fans, sports collectors, and all hobbyists. Welcome to the Card King Sports and Variety Show. I am your host, the Catman, Brian Cataquet, a.k.a. the Card King. We are live on ABC's KMET 1490 AM.com, your number one spot right here for news and talk on the West Coast. I thank everyone for tuning in this morning. On the telephone line, I welcome to the program former Major League Baseball catcher who played for the Expos, Phillies, Cubs, and the New York Yankees. And welcome to the program, Barry Foote. Barry, Brian C., honor to have you.
Thank you, Brian. Glad to be here.
Oh, it's my pleasure. Barry, you were born and raised in North Carolina, attended Smithfield Selma High, and by the age of 18, you were drafted by a Major League ball club. Not a bad start for a teenager, huh?
Yeah, it was a good start. It was sort of had been my dream to be drafted, and was fortunate enough to get drafted.
Now, if we take a look at what I like to call, Barry, snapshots of your baseball career, 1970, memorable year for you, drafted by Montreal, first round, third player overall. Talk about, if you can, recalling how that June day, 1970, began for you. And when you first heard the news, you were going to be an Expo.
Well, I'd been scouted heavily by a lot of the higher draft pick teams, and we had thought my father, who had played professional baseball, so it wasn't a novelty for him to understand what was going on with the draft process. We thought we were going to be drafted by the Cleveland Indians, who had the number 2 pick. There was no question that Mike Ivy was going number 1. He was there was no question about where he was going at San Diego, number 1. So we didn't know for sure what was going to happen, but it was funny. Out of nowhere, I got a phone call at home from the Associated Press, a whole lot different than the way they do the drafting today. And they said, "Well, you've been drafted by the Montreal Expos." So that's how I found out about it. I found out about it from the news services before I found out about it from the Montreal Expos. So it's they've come a long way since those days of how they handled the draft process. It's more of an event today than it was back in 1970.
Now, the Expos, they made a wide decision choosing you because you produced very solid for them, Barry. And, in the minor league organizations, you had solid numbers. 72 with Quebec Carnivals. You hit 16 home runs, drove in 75 ribbies. 73 with Peninsula. You hit 19 homers and led all qualifying hitters on the roster with a 260-plus batting average. How difficult was it, or was it difficult for you first time you saw minor league pitching?
Well, yeah, it's funny. In my first time, I was in the rookie league, and there's a bunch of young kids just like myself out of high school, a few college kids, but mostly in my age group. I think the second day I went like 4 for 6 or something. I thought, well, this is going to be a piece of cake. I'll probably hit 400 in this league. So it was easy initially, but as is the story of baseball, it gets harder the longer you play in some ways. And but overall, I made the All-Star team in the Gulf Coast League. I was the AA All-Star catcher for all of AA baseball in AA ball, and the same thing in AAA. So, from the standpoint of an upward trending career in the minor leagues, I hit A ball, AA, AAA, and then I was in the big leagues the next year. So that was a nice sort of way to go to the big leagues.
Yeah, and you now, did you go in as a catcher? Because looking at your bio, you also played infield, right? You played first base, third base, I believe.
I was actually a catcher. I had played other positions in high school, but I changed over to catcher end of my junior year in high school. My father felt like that was going to be my best position to become a high draft pick. And I it's not something you probably would know, but 3 of the top 4 picks that year were catchers: Mike Ivy, myself, and Darryl Porter. So it was an interesting year for catchers, and all 3 of us had pretty good careers. 8 to 10 to 12 to 14 year careers. So, that was a fairly successful draft.
Now, I mean, looking at your numbers, Barry, 1974, your first full season with the Expos. I mean, you did a very solid a year for you. You showcased your talent to baseball right off the bat. Voted National League Player of the Week mid-September. You led National League in sac flies with 12, which was a club record for the Expos back then, I believe. You led all big league catchers with 83 assists. 60 RBIs, batted 262 in 125 games. I mean, very solid year for the Expos. I mean, I believe Gene Mauch regarded you as the next Johnny Bench.
Yeah, Gene was always, always high on me, and obviously I didn't end up with those kind of numbers, but I always respected Gene. I thought he was the best baseball guy I was around at the major league level.
And you also, I believe, the batting coach at the time was Larry Doby, right?
Larry Doby was our hitting instructor, I believe, my rookie year, and then he went to take another job. Then Duke Snyder came on after that, so had some pretty big name hitting coaches there in Montreal.
Oh, huge names. I mean, how was it working with Duke Snyder?
Well, I always liked Duke. I liked Duke very much. He was a great guy to work with, and obviously a very big name, especially when you'd come into New York or L.A.
Yeah, and just amazing career. I mean, there's no question in my mind that the Expos, they were originally grooming you to be their full-time catcher over Gary Carter, right?
Well, I was catching, and Gary was in the outfield, and I had some injury issues, and Gary got better, and then Dick Williams came in, and, there was kind of a little bit of a controversy among the pitchers of, who wanted to pitch to who and all, and he just, we had a meeting with when Dick Williams took over, and we going into the season, and he basically said, hey, your catcher's going to be Gary Carter, and I had not signed that year. That was the first year you could become a free agent, and I had not signed a contract. So, the writing was pretty much on the wall at that point in time that they decided to go with Gary, which obviously was a pretty good decision. It's hard to beat having a Hall of Fame catcher. And, then I was traded at the trading deadline that year.
So how was your relationship with Gary Carter? You guys had a good relationship?
Yeah, he was a little different kind of guy than I was. He was a California guy, I was a Southern guy, so we had a little different mentality. But I didn't have any issues with Gary, other than we had different kinds of personalities. It was obvious he was going to be a good player. I don't know that anybody knew that he was going to be a Hall of Fame player.
Yeah, I mean, I read a quote back in the 70s. Somewhere I read it that Gary Carter didn't seem to fit in with the team. Did you find that to be true?
Well, he was young. He was a very young guy. He was, there's a little bit of different attitude from California guys. He had a certain, they call him the kid because he was, he was enthusiastic and a little bit immature. But those things worked to his, benefit and, over the long run. So he just had a different personality. And, I was like the golden-haired child at that point in time. And when you got another guy coming up and, he wants to be a catcher, but he's out in the outfield, so I'm sure that wasn't something he really wanted to do. And it's funny, he had many more injuries played in the outfield than he did catching, running into walls and different things. So, eventually it was one of those situations where the Expos probably did have to make a decision. Although they wanted me to sign, they offered me a multi-year contract to stay there. I just wanted to go somewhere where I could be the everyday catcher, and it turned out that I went to Phillies and probably made a bad decision and signed at the time, a very large contract with them on a 5-year deal. And I, probably in retrospect should have gone the free agency route, and I probably would have ended up in Chicago with the Chicago Cubs anyway.
I mean, I know there was a quote that I read, your old teammate Larry Parish, back in 75, he mentioned, and I quote, Carter wanted to catch, but we have Barry Foote, who was better. I mean, that's a nice accolade from Larry Parish.
Well, yeah, and, it's I probably was at that point in time better. I was always a good defensive catcher. Gary just got better and better. He became a extremely, good hitter. If you look now at the lifetime stuff when you're talking about all-time great catchers, he's in the, top 5 to 10 all the time. So, at that point in time, I was probably a better player, but he was inexperienced and young. He came up when he was, I believe he was 20 or 21. So, he just got better with age, and obviously ended up with a great career.
We're talking with former professional baseball player Barry Foote, who joins the program. You mentioned the Philadelphia Phillies, Barry. 1978, you were part of that NL East Championship team. Now, there was some tough competition on that squad. Tim McCarver was also there, Bob Boone. How did you get along with those two?
I got along great with both of them. Basically, McCarver really wasn't, the competition. He was at the latter part of his career, but he was a specific catcher for Steve Carlton. He was his own personal catcher. And Booney was a great player. I was traded over there because Boone had a bad knee, and they didn't know how bad it was going to be. And I was brought in as insurance. And, I was a free agent at the end of that season. And then they came and offered me a great deal. And I really liked playing there. I liked, and I was told something that didn't really happen, that there was a very strong possibility they were going to move Booney. They ended up not doing it. So I ended up, really kind of wasting a year of my career, although it was great being on that ball club. I really liked those guys. I liked playing in Philadelphia. And we were a very good ball club. I was also there in 77 when we won a division. And in 78, we won the division. So we had 2 very good years while I was there. And then, in 1980, they went on and won the World Series. So it was a good experience with a good ball club, with a good bunch of guys I enjoyed playing with.
Amazing. And then you play for the Cubs. Now, I found a little clip that I want to play. I want to air now. This was, I believe, 1979. Let's hear it now. Barry Foote at the plate.
I think on a sacrifice fly before Barry Foote batted here in the 7th.
That's pretty well hit. That's way back there. Back. Hey, hey, my boy. It broke a window.
I mean, that was now for those listening, you can catch this clip on YouTube. This was April 22, 1979. You're playing for the Cubs against your old teammate, the Expos. And boy, did you hit a bomb. I believe it was a back-to-back home run. Kingman hit a blast. And then the bomb that you hit, I don't know if you recall that game, Barry. I mean, it was a massive blast. Do you remember that?
Well, if it's the one that I would remember most, it actually went through the window across the street. And anytime you're following Kingman hit some of the most prodigious home runs I've ever seen. So it was nice to, it was also nice to do it against my old teammates. And I believe the pitcher was Rudy May, who ended up being a teammate of mine with the Yankees.
Oh, really? Wow. Yeah, but I mean that blast. I mean, that went further than Kingman's blast. That was a massive blast. I mean, now you were more known for a pull hitter?
Yeah, I'd say overall I was more of a pull hitter than I was going the other way. But it's funny when I look at a lot of stuff. My son sends me things. I don't really look that often now. I did hit some balls to right and right center. I'd kind of forgotten about that because I thought of myself as almost a dead pull hitter, but I did use a lot of the other side of the field, but mostly I was a pull hitter.
Now, talk about the trade. I mean, you went to the Yankees. Were you excited to get traded to the Yankees? What was your reaction when you heard the news?
I'll be honest with you. I really liked Chicago. I think of all the places I played, I enjoyed Chicago more than any place as far as the city and all. The issue with Chicago at that point in time is the Wrigley family. I think Mr. Wrigley had passed away, and they had an inheritance tax issue, and they basically were breaking up the ball club in order to sell it. and they got rid of almost every player of any substance. And so, yeah, I was excited to go to the Yankees. I mean, that's especially if you live in the South. Before the Atlanta Braves sort of blossomed out, the Yankees were the major team that everybody sort of followed. So, yeah, it was exciting to go to the Yankees, knowing that you were going to have a chance to win a division every year.
I mean, and right off the bat, again, I believe you hit a home run your first at bat with the Yankees. You hit 5 home runs in your first 7 games with the Yankees. That's 80-81. So right off the bat, I mean, you adjusted very well to American League.
I did. I was lucky. I was fortunate because I think I was in a 1 for 27 with the Cubs that year. And when I went to the Yankees, it was one of those things. I hit a bunch of balls hard and gone through a period of time where I wasn't having any luck. And then my first at bat with the Yankees, I hit a home run. And these were all on the road. That first game was in Detroit, and the rest of them were on the West Coast. And I just got hot, and I hit home runs against the Angels, and then against the Oakland team, and then we finished up in Seattle. And I actually hit a couple balls down the line there just foul, so I could have had a couple more home runs there. But so it was good to get back into go back to home when you're coming off a hot streak of hitting as a new player.
Now, were you part of that 81 World Series team? You were on the squad, right? 81 World Series Yanks.
Yep, I was 81. Mm-hmm.
So I mean, what was that? I mean, you played in the World Series. I mean.
Yeah, it was. There's nothing like. Well, that was especially a great World Series from the standpoint of the experience, not the final outcome, but the experience. Anytime it's New York against L.A., that's probably, about as good a World Series as you'll be part of.
Man, and then you also then you played for the Columbus Clippers. I believe that's when Don Mattingly started. Did you get a chance to interact with Mattingly, a young Mattingly?
I did. I knew Don from spring training, and I went down there on a rehab assignment from an injury. And but at that point in time, quite frankly, he was not the Don Mattingly that ended up being in the big leagues. He was more of a spray hitter, mediocre power. And then he went to winter ball a couple years later, and I'm not sure, but I think one of the hitting instructors went down there and really got him into pulling. And he just became a totally different hitter when he got back to the big leagues.
Yeah, I mean, he was amazing player. And then as a coach, you participated with the Chicago White Sox, right, in the 90s, early 90s, 1991. How was coaching life for you? Did you enjoy it?
I enjoyed it. I had managed 6 years in the minor leagues. I'd always thought I was going to be a manager at the big league level. And I had great success in the minor leagues as a manager. And so when I got to the White Sox, Jeff Torborg was the manager. So, that's the reason I got the job. He hired me. And fortunately that year, Bo Jackson, actually it was our second year, Bo Jackson came in. And so I got a chance to, be around really a great teammate, an incredible athlete. And, so it was really a lot of fun. I enjoyed those guys, and one of the biggest regrets I have from my baseball career is that Jeff Torborg took a job with the Mets, and I went along with him to New York. I really would have loved to stay with those. We had a foundation of young guys that had come through the White Sox organization, and Ventura and the Big Hurt, McDowell, and others, and I really missed the fact that, the 2 years I was there, we won over 90 games. If they had the playoff system they have today, we'd have been in playoffs both years. So we were on the, right on the precipice of being a great ball club.
Yeah, and now a couple of questions, if I may, on catching. What advice can you give to young catchers who want to play the position at a collegiate level or minor league level? What does it take to be to get drafted?
Well, this catching has changed so greatly now. They do things that I would not, I wouldn't teach if I was in the teaching mode today. I think the biggest thing I would encourage a kid, if he wants to catch, is really work on your arm strength. I really believe in throwing programs. I believe in long toss. I think if I was going to do something along the lines of learning how to increase my arm strength, and I know he's kind of a controversial guy, but I think Trevor Bauer has the best concept of how to build arm strength. So I'd say do that. And, one of the things I really believe in is learning to have real soft hands behind the plate. They don't really teach that today. They teach a snatch and grab sort of way of catching. And from the standpoint, I think if you went across the board, I talked to guys who caught in the big leagues in my time period and even after it, it's just a different methodology to catching they teach today. And I don't particularly like it. I watch games and they're not very well, they're not cleanly caught. One of the things that Gene Monk taught me catching, he said, if you've done a great job catching the game today, nobody will realize you were back there. And keep everything quiet and clean. They don't do a lot of that today. A lot of days you'll see their numbers going back to the backstop more than you'll see them catching the ball in front of them. It's really a little bit sad what's going on with the catching today, in my opinion.
And any training advice? Like how do you train your legs and your knees, to squat down for that period of time? What training regimen can you recommend?
I think stretching is one of the the things that I didn't do that as good as I should have. I started doing it later in my career, more so than earlier in my career. But as I talk to people about spring training, they say, well, you need X number of weeks for spring training for hitters. I thought probably 3 weeks is what you really need to be ready for the season. But one of the things, in all honesty, is that there's only one way to really get in shape for catching, and that's to catch. And that's why it's important to get your innings in during spring training, because there really isn't anything you can do to sort of get ready for catching other than get back there and squatting and catching.
Yeah, it's very difficult position. And one question, if I may, on hitting. How important do you think, because I played a little ball in a collegiate level, I remember my coach used to tell me that when I turn, you got to make sure you put a lot of weight on your back leg and turn those hips. Do you agree with that?
Well, I think it's an even distribution. Obviously you're going to be a little bit favored weight toward the backside. They teach hitting a whole lot different today with this launch angle stuff and things like that. But yeah, I'd say, the hips are certainly something that are a major part of hitting. But I'll be honest with you, either you're going to be a decent hitter or you're going to struggle hitting. And, I hear the hitter that I saw that improved more than any hitter that I saw in my major league time was probably Larry Boa, who actually ended up hitting 300 a year or so in the big leagues. And, he really wasn't a real good hitter, but Billy DeMaris really helped him. But the fact is, you can only marginally help, I think, guys that are going to be big league hitters. It's a little different for, kids in the minor leagues and, the non-professional hitters. But in a lot of ways, it's almost the fact is first do no harm in hitters. I think a lot of times we overcoach them. I think when you start putting things like your coach talking about the hips and all, I think you got these muscle memories have got to be done by just continually doing this stuff over and over and over again until it's almost monotonous. Repetition is probably the biggest factor in baseball.
Yeah. And how important do you think it really is to have a hitting coach? Because, I believe it's something that you can't teach. Roberto Clemente, he used to hit off his front foot, and how great he was. Do you think the hitting coach is a necessary need for a ball club?
Well, yeah, I do. And as much for the psychological part of this, just to hold your hand when things are going bad. And I think there's certain hitting coaches that have a philosophy that is very helpful for hitting. But a lot of this is just not doing things wrong. If you can learn to do things correctly and then have a continuous repetition of doing things correctly. That's what baseball is. There's very few movements that you have to do in baseball to be a good athlete in baseball. And, one of the first things of that is keep your front side closed in. You do that for throwing. You do that for hitting. So, yeah, I think it's good to have a hitting instructor. And I think, too, a lot of it's just to get you through the hard times, but also a lot of it is the extra work you have to do when you're having a tough time. So it's good that I think it's smart that now they go with 2 hitting coaches because you need a couple different guys to be able to take care of all the hitters. You could be taking care of somebody on the field. That second coach could have somebody underneath in the cages in these stadiums.
Very interesting. I have 1 minute left. Final question, Barry. The most difficult pitcher you ever caught in your career?
I'll give you a name, Dennis Blair, and you might not even remember him. He was a young guy. He threw hard. The ball moved all over the place, and he was difficult to catch. But other than that, all the guys, outside of that, I caught Charlie Huff in spring training when he came up to the White Sox with the knuckleball. So that was a challenge, but yeah, I didn't catch him in a real game.
Oh, man. I really appreciate it. I appreciate your time today. Thank you so much for the information.
Yeah, Brian, it was a pleasure. Thank you.
It's an honor. That was Barry Foote. Until next week, happy collecting to all.